I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and welcome to The Sidebar, a weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today, we're very pleased to be talking with head of the Dixon Gallery and Gardens, Kevin Sharp. So stay with us for a conversation with Kevin. Kevin, thanks for being here.
Oh, it's great to be here, Eric. Thanks.
We figured out it's been a while, which is kind of really absurd.
I just thought it was because I did so poorly last time.
No, you didn't. I mean, you know that I have this love of museums. I'm not necessarily particularly, and I actually have been to 3 museums in the last few months, and we're going to talk through those.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I have a love of museums, so it's been too long because it was actually the previous podcast show, The Extra, that you were on. But anyway, and then also coincidentally, it's like Kevin Sharp, Eric Barnes Day. You're going to tour me around the Dixon later today. We probably should have done the tour first and then this, but it'll be fine.
I don't know why we didn't squeeze in lunch as well.
It's true. Just drive around. It's kind of a buddy
Hang
movie.
out. Yeah.
So when I go to the Dixon today, we're taping this on Tuesday of this week before it airs on the WYXR on Thursday. What am I going to see?
Well, you're going to see our current exhibitions. The main show is Black Artists in America, from Civil Rights to the Bicentennial. It's part of our suite of 3 exhibitions that look at the history of African American art. And the first installment was in 2021 and looked at the period between the Great Depression and the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement in the 50s. And then the third edition will be in 2025 when we move from the mid-70s until 9/11.
Until 9/11. You brought me these beautiful books, which doesn't make for good podcasting, but I have to thank you because it's what are these? There's a technical term for these books. They're
exhibition catalogs.
I was going to say, I was close. Exhibition catalogs for the 2 that are really beautiful, and I'm looking forward to seeing them. What artists include?
Oh, they're the major artists of the 50s, 60s, 70s that you'd expect to see. Elizabeth Catlett, Charles White, Romare Bearden, and then moving later into the 70s, Frederick J. Brown and Norman Lewis, and just a host of others.
And how many Memphis artists? Any Memphis artists?
Yeah, a couple. A couple, actually. Luther Hampton is in the show, the Memphis sculptor. And then James Little is also represented in the exhibition. Very notable. James now lives in New York, but he's a Memphis native, and it's very, very notable and timely because he designed the basketball court down in Tom Lee Park. The design for that. And it was based on a painting he showed at the Dixon when we did a survey of his recent work in 2022 at the Dixon. So, so those two are the 2 artists from Memphis who feature most prominently.
Yeah. Is it part of a traveling show, or is it one you all put together? I mean, because that whole thing is always really interesting to me, that sometimes museums, there's a show out there that's traveling and you guys get to book them. Sometimes you work on a show that then travels, but it doesn't necessarily have all art from the museum who put it together. What's the sort of nature of this one? Okay,
so this is what we call a loan show, which was what the first installment was as well. And yes, this exhibition is traveling. The Dixon is the organizing institution for this show. It's not a project that somebody else put together and we're taking. We organize the show with before I forget to do this, I need to give a big shout out to Dr. Ernestine Jenkins from the University of Memphis, who is the coordinating curator for this entire project. And she is the one who actually organized the show, and she'll be the lead on the third exhibition as well. The first show was in 2021, and we started organizing it in probably 2018. And then, of course, the pandemic came along. Things got shut down. We had 2 partners who were going to take the show. Their exhibition calendar got scrambled, and we had to make a decision. Are we going to do this show alone, or do we defer as well? And we just decided not to blow up our exhibition calendar, and we stayed with the project, and so we did it alone. And at first, I was not very happy because, of course, if I'm doing it alone, the Dixon is absorbing all the cost of organizing that project as opposed to sharing it with my partners. And but it was such an important project. We'd had so much invested in it. And by the fall of 2021, we felt like this show needs to happen. And what ultimately occurred, Eric, is that we had the opportunity to squeeze a whole lot more Memphis into that show because it wasn't traveling anywhere. It wasn't going to other institutions where it wouldn't have the same resonance. So we built this tremendous relationship with Lemoyne-Owen College, and it was just such a great experience. They were major lenders to the show.
Yeah.
And then we also built a relationship with the Second Congregational Church right across the street from Lemoyne-Owen, and they were not having services again, again. And we borrowed the altarpiece, took the altarpiece right out of the church, which the head of the art department at Lemoyne-Owen in the early 1950s had painted, and we had it conserved for this church, and it was one of the stars of the exhibition.
Yeah.
So this second installment is traveling to the Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento. Great partner, great institution. And so because of that, we try to keep the show on a more national scope. Gotcha. What's going on in the country between, say, 1954 and 1976.
Yeah, yeah. And partners on the next phase of it?
We're not sure yet.
Yeah.
We're not sure. Maybe the Crocker again. And we've had conversations with, the Georgia Museum of Art in Athens and the Westmoreland Museum of American Art just outside of Pittsburgh. But there's still a venue open, at least one venue open for sure.
Yeah. Again, we're talking to Kevin Sharp from the Dixon Gallery and Gardens. I'm saying that right? Dixon Gallery and Gardens.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, I say these things wrong all the time.
Did you just move to town?
No, it is. I do them wrong all the time. The one I do wrong is I call it the Botanic Garden, but it's actually...
You call it the Botanical Garden.
I call it the Botanical Gardens, and it's actually the Botanic Garden.
Well, it's just across the street from the Dixon, so I'll walk you over there when we're together this afternoon.
We're there all the time. We have a seminar coming up, Commercial Real Estate, featuring Paul Young, Ursula Madden, and Gwen Fisher. That's on November 30th. Go to Eventbrite. So I just screw these things up all the time, and I'm sort of like, I just might as well own it, but that one I didn't screw up, so that's good.
No, you had it right on the money.
When I go out there again this afternoon, what else will I see?
Well, we also do, and our membership knows that. A lot of our visitors know it. Certainly the arts community in Memphis knows it. But since 2008, we've been doing a series of exhibitions for contemporary Memphis artists. And at this point, we've probably done well over 60 of them. And the current show is the work of a young artist, probably the youngest painter to participate in this series, which we call the Mallory and Wurzburger series, after the two galleries where we feature their work. And it's a young woman named Kaylin Webster, and she is just an outstanding young painter. Yeah. I mean, the sky's the limit for her. She's got tremendous, tremendous talent, and so we'll walk you through that, and then in our interactive gallery in the Liz and Tommy Farnsworth Education Building, which we built in 2019, we have a show called Painting with Parkinson's, and it's the work of students who have Parkinson's and their caregivers who are in this program that we have, and their work is just really kind of incredible. And it's a kind of art therapy that was invented by a woman in Australia probably 40 years ago. Her husband had early onset Parkinson's, and what this creative action does is it fires different synapses in the brain, and it really seems to make a difference in the lives of people who are contending with this disease. And the work is awesome.
Yeah.
The work is creative and beautiful, and we'll make sure you see that as well.
I'll bring tissues on that one. My mother painted her whole life. It was never a...
That's right. You
she painted. Yeah, but she always painted, and then she got Alzheimer's. And she painted with her Alzheimer's even after she could no longer speak. It was really didn't recognize us, my brother, and it was just
So
the tragedy that is Alzheimer's, but she could still paint. And I have some of her paintings from when she was well that I really love. And then I have a couple from when she was not so well. And they're incredibly special that she was able to do that, and she could be very, very focused on that. Alzheimer's is not Parkinson's, but there's some similarities there.
Well, there are. And the need for that creative outlet and for that ability to be personally expressive, it's consistent among all of us, really.
Yeah.
And so, and it apparently makes a tremendous difference. I know we did this program with 9-to-1 Parkinson's Fighters, which is just a great organization here in town. We most of our education programs, we partner with somebody. And so we're developing programs that the community needs and wants. And that this is just really kind of a high watermark in our efforts. And the show, I think you'll like it. The show's impressive.
Yeah. You also have just I was on the website, as I often do when I guest on, I'm kind of looking, you have this amazing amount of activities going on. And I think it's listed on your site. Just, there's this pumpkin house that Natalie Van Gundy, producer of the show, is very excited about for photos. Were you just there? I think she was just there or was planning to go there. Okay. And so, but there's also just this week, there's a book club, there's yoga, there's lunchtime meditations, there's therapeutic art, there are some lectures. You're doing a lecture tomorrow night. There's another lecture from tomorrow. Excuse me. I shouldn't say noon. Tomorrow. So it'll be after this. Sorry. The timing's not good. The Kaleidoscope Club with kids. Has that been the case always, or have you really gotten even more into just a kind of cycle of activities?
Well, we definitely amped up the program starting in about 2008. Okay. And really, it was when I hired to be our director of horticulture, a young woman named Margarita Sandino, and she is just a ball of energy. And for the first dozen years that she was director of education at the Dixon, she was completely itinerant. She had no dedicated space to do her programs. And we went from having 2 standing education programs in 2007, 2008 when we got to the Dixon to 30 within about a year's time. And so it was a constant battle to find a spot to do these programs for children as young as infants and for seniors as of any age and everybody in between. And so when we built the Liz and Tommy Farnsworth Education Building in 2018, 2019, it was just such a gift. It was, because as I was telling Natalie, our biggest challenge is always space. The room to do all the stuff that we want to do and need to do. And then, of course, we've got all this stuff, our permanent collection for sure, which has to be cared for and stored when it's not on view. But we've also got all this other detritus kind of laying around that we use weekly,
and that, you
monthly.
Mean detritus in the best of ways.
In the best. No, I mean we're just a notch above hoarders. And
it's a museum. Museums hoard.
Well, and the Dixon staff know who they are. Anyway, it made all the difference. So we are consistently adding to the number of programs we're doing. I mean, you can't possibly do enough.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you noticed. Yeah, it's a great thing about the Dixon.
Let me do a little housekeeping here in the middle, and then we'll get back and talk more about the gardens and talk about some other things going on. But let me remind everyone, the Sidebar airs on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30. I'm Eric Barnes. The show is focused on community arts, culture, and everything in between. It's also a podcast, one of a number of weekly podcasts we do at the Daily Memphian, including the Bill Dries' Politics podcast. Actually, Sam Hardiman participates in that too. That's On the Record. We have the Memphis Grizzly podcast that Chris Harrington and Drew Hill do. We brought back our Memphis Tigers podcast with Greg Gaston hosting and our various Tigers writers on there as well. And we've got our food podcast, Sound Bites, with Chris Harrington and Holly Whitfield. Sometimes I sit in. And that airs also on WYXR at 11 on Thursdays, right before the Sidebar. Again, all of them are available as podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can get them on the Daily Memphian site as well. I mentioned WYXR. These two shows, Soundbites and Sidebar, are available at WYXR.org, or you can go to the WYXR app and you can get all the archives of all the shows on WYXR, talk and music. It's a very good way to listen to the various music shows. I should also mention that WYXR is nonprofit, listener-supported radio, so support it if you can. Become a member or just donate. You can go to the app or go to the website to do that. And I should also always say that the Daily Memphian is a nonprofit newsroom and very much appreciates your paid subscriptions or your donations. You can go to dailymemphian.com to learn more about that. We recently had Kanji Anthony on the show. She's delightful. She's amazing. She's just amazing. And her new show has started or about to start as we record. It has started. Okay, so her new show on Channel 3. We also recently had Mary Casciola and Holly Whitfield on. Mary's our editorial director, talking about the 5th anniversary of the Daily Memphian. In September was our 5th anniversary. It's one of a series of shows we've done about our 5 years of madness. We also, I maybe mentioned behind the headlines that we do with the good folks over at WKNO. Recently had Paul Young, mayor-elect, on, and we had a great conversation about parks with Nick Walker, the parks director, Jen Andrews from out at Shelby Farms, and Carol Coletta from Tomley Park. Tina Sullivan was invited from Overton Park but couldn't be there, but we're talking about conservancies, parks, public-private partnerships, all of that sort of thing. Also on Behind the Headlines, we have coming up, I believe, this week, part 1 of Jim Strickland, the outgoing 2-term mayor. We're doing 2 shows with Jim talking about some immediate issues, because there are always immediate issues, but also just a look back at his time in office. Coming up not too long after that is Doug McGowan, used to be COO of the city, now head of MLGW for about 10 months. Well, opening question will be, do you regret taking this job? And he won't answer honestly. But Doug, we look forward to talking to Doug. There's a lot to talk about there. And then we also have a show on the big fiber and broadband initiative that the city is putting together. That's coming up in the next few weeks as well. I mentioned very quickly and somewhat jokingly, but we do have a commercial real estate seminar coming up. Paul Young, mayor-elect, will do a keynote address, maybe take some questions. Ursula Madden, formerly of local TV and formerly of the Strickland administration. She's now with Ford and Blue Oval City. She'll be giving everyone an update on what's going on with the huge, massive billions of dollars, I think, that are being invested out there, as well as Gwen Fisher from the Memphis Area Chamber of Commerce. And then 3 guys whose names I don't know. Sounds like a band or a restaurant or a food truck. But actually, it's 3 guys from commercial real estate who'll be talking on the panel with the other folks I just mentioned about various sectors of commercial real estate. That's at the Botanic Garden. Did I say that right? Amazing. The Botanic Garden, November 30th at 3 p.m. Go to Eventbrite, search for Daily Memphian, and you do have to buy tickets to that. They are, this one actually sometimes sells out. So you do, if you want to go to the Eventbrite and search for Daily Memphian. I am now looking at the names of the 3 guys I don't know, and actually I know all of them. Carson Claybrook, Ron Kastner, and Tim Mashburn. So that's embarrassing. I know all 3 of them. I just didn't know it was them. There's a lot of details, and I'm not good with names.
You're only CEO.
I'm only CEO and executive editor. I mean, what am I supposed to know? But again, we're here with Kevin Sharp from the director of the Dixon Museum.
No,
is it okay?
Try it again.
Can I say I can't shortcut it?
You can't rebrand the institution.
I'm not so much rebranding.
Yeah, well,
it's like people say, DM. It's just like a shortcut thing.
No.
Oh, okay. Kevin Sharp, we'll take all that out. Kevin Sharp, the director of the Dixon Gallery and Gardens.
I insist that you leave it in.
Yeah, we will. Actually, we will. But what is let's do the formal title, though. We didn't make me suffer through messing that up.
My formal title is the Linda W. and S. Herbert Ray Director, named for the Rays, who were such important civic leaders and couldn't have been more important to the Dixon Gallery and Gardens.
Yeah. Let's talk about the gardens. What's going on in the gardens? Because it is the Dixon Gallery and Garden. And unlike, if somebody who's listening hasn't been there, that is part of the magic of going
it's a huge
there.
part.
It's a very cool museum. I as you know, I love the museum and I love its intimacy and I love how much art you have up. It's not a Spartan place. There's a lot of going on inside.
For a small institution, we try to put as much out as we possibly can.
But what's going on in the gardens?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because we have a. This isn't so much for visitors, but we are redoing the irrigation system at the Dixon right now.
Right.
And
you're looking for volunteers.
And I'm looking for you to bring your shovel this afternoon.
Yeah, that's why you're taking me out there. You said you're going to buy me a drink, but actually you're going to give me a shovel.
Well, it'll be a drink of water because you'll need it to keep going. No, it's a monumental project. I mean, we're a small garden. We're only 17 acres, but we, to redo the entire irrigation system, which the irrigation system in your bathroom is more sophisticated than the irrigation system at the Dixon was prior to this launching of this project. And so it's long overdue, and it'll just make the gardens that much better. And we can only do this project at a time when we don't need our existing irrigation system, because I mean there were pipes and sprinkler heads out there. They were just not completely ineffective. They just were not as effective as they should be. They weren't automated. We weren't watering at the right time. We are looking to make a much better and much more beautiful and verdant Dixon Gardens, but it involves months and months of mini construction with a trencher and little skinny shovels and 7 miles of pipe.
And not destroying everything.
And we have to do it while we're also planting 250,000 tulips this fall, which we'll be doing again, and doing this thing that the garden staff absolutely dreads every year, which is leaf collection. And
See, people don't realize, that these things, this is part of making it happen.
We have over 1,000 trees at the Dixon, and pretty much all of them have leaves.
Yeah.
And it's just a job. So we're a little bit in the dormant season, but I mean, it's also fall.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that it had been so dry and hot that it wasn't going to be especially attractive fall. But suddenly the redbuds have just turned, the dogwoods have just turned bright red. The hickory trees have turned bright gold, and it's as beautiful as it has ever been. So it's just a great time to come out and walk the Dixon Gardens and, feed your soul a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mentioned earlier, and we've talked about before, that I do have this kind of love of museums, not in a sophisticated way, but I do just love to wander through a museum. And I traveled some this fall, late summer, fall. So I was in Florence, I was in Rome, and I was also in Boston.
Well, that's a little bit of travel now, isn't it?
It's a little bit of travel, isn't it? Yes. But I want to talk about the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. I had to write that down because I screwed up. It is a beautiful little museum.
Incredible. In the Fens.
It is
in Boston.
It has a story of its own. Isabella Stewart Gardner is a fascinating person.
Incredible.
Collected all this art and then basically said, you can't add or subtract from it.
Right.
It will be this. This is it. That is what she endowed. And yet still you go in there and it doesn't remotely feel stale or old or ye olden kind of. It's just unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. I mean, the first thing you encounter when you walk in is John Singer Sargent's El Jaleo, this great dance subject. It's one of the great works of American art history.
It was one I didn't know that was there, and I know a bit about Singer Sargent. Again, I know enough to know enough, a little, and I was blown away.
Yeah,
I needed a moment.
Yeah, well,
it is this beautiful, striking. You just can't. I had to go back to it. On the way out, I was like, I'm going to take one more minute. I'm just going to go over there and be with that painting for a minute, which I've done before, but that was startling.
I mean, it's the first thing you see when you walk in, and it's just a striking composition of a Spanish dancer and musicians in the background, and the physical movement in the painting is just so beautiful and elegant. And Sargent was just almost unnaturally gifted at making paint submit to his will.
Yeah.
And this is a painting done at the kind of the height of his powers. But then you go upstairs and there's just one masterpiece after another. I mean, she was advised by Bernard Berenson, who was, kind of one of the fathers of Italian Renaissance art history. And so he gained her access to works of art, that are just, it would be impossible to acquire today.
And it is her home.
Yeah.
It's a very elaborate, beautiful home
Italian,
of a very wealthy person. But in that sense, it kind of reminded me a bit of the Dixon. There is this intimacy to it that you are in a home. You don't lose track of that. A different home than the Dixon. But it's so cool. If anybody's going to Boston, it's amazing. Then we're in Florence. I'm going to say it wrong. The Uffizi.
Say it again.
No.
I'll probably say it wrong too. The Uffizi. Yeah.
Okay. That was, I mean, it's obviously amazing and this amazing art,
Yeah.
but it was slightly miserable because there were so many people.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were part of the problem. We were there in pretty high tourist season.
Yeah.
All of Florence is just a victim of its own beauty and its own just attractiveness, and the museum very much so. But it was very cool
to see Italian Renaissance paintings where the Italian Renaissance was invented.
Yeah,
is just pretty special.
We also went through their I'm going to say it wrong, the Palazzo Pitti and Boboli Gardens, which is the Medici family, which ruled and controlled much of
invented
Italy.
Banking.
Yes, invented banking.
Good thing to invent.
Yeah. And that was one of the strangest museums of an old museum. It's very old castle kind of feeling,
right? But
feels like not an ornate castle. It feels like they were like protecting things from attack.
Yeah.
It feels more like a fortress than a beautiful like Versailles castle. But you wander through. There's very little signage. I don't know when you were last there.
It's been a while.
So you're sort of deciphering the handwritten stuff. Every once in a while there'll be a signage. So for someone like me who doesn't, I know a little bit. I'm just kind of wandering through this place with art, new and old, and some of the coolest things I've ever seen. And I don't know who they were because there was no way to figure out who had painted them.
And sometimes isn't that better? Yes. Isn't that better just to walk through and enjoy the art for what it is without all the explanation? I mean, if they are no longer allowing you to smoke in there, then they are not. And that's a change, and that's an upgrade since I was there last. But and if they don't have any windows open,
the windows were closed, and there's some like portable, like someone ran to Costco and got some dehumidifiers. I mean, I know enough about museums to know that it was slightly horrifying. Like there's no way this is good enough to keep these paintings the way they need to be kept. I mean,
but I get it. I mean, when and this is a little bit of inside baseball, when we're installing shows at the Dixon, I mean, the last thing we do is put up the labels and the text panels and all that stuff. And it's so beautiful without it. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's just so tempting. Let's just leave it. I mean, we never would because it's wholly irresponsible. Well, I'm not saying that the Florentines are irresponsible, but it's just different. And the shows look so extraordinary,
right?
Without the labels on the wall and the text panels and all that stuff. Well,
sometimes I'm guilty of going through a museum and you look first to that and you say, "Oh, that's a Rembrandt."
Yeah,
I must think this must be awesome, and then I look at the art, And I try to stop myself from doing that because I just kind of want to walk through and sort of like look at the stuff art and experience, and then go, "Oh, that happens to be somebody I've never heard of, or it's Rembrandt, or whoever." And this forced that because you once in a while you could make out a name, but generally you couldn't. It was. We've got just a couple of minutes left here. Again, here with Kevin Sharp from the Dixon Gallery and Gardens.
See,
not the Dixon Museum.
What you can say is just the Dixon.
Okay, I can do that.
You can do that.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down. But we haven't had you on the sidebar before, which means we've never asked you. Which I try to ask everyone, what was your first concert?
You asked me that.
I did?
When I was on the, when I was on the extra. You
absolutely. I've forgotten.
Maybe it was sidebar then.
We're figuring that out.
Well,
we'll figure that out.
The first concert I ever went to was probably, I don't know, I was probably 12 years old, and my parents took me to the Ozark Empire Fair in Springfield, Missouri, and I saw Porter Wagner and the Wagoneers with a young Dolly Parton. Pretty good.
That's pretty great.
You know what? Maybe I'll go to another one of these things called concerts.
Yeah. And then what was your first that you maybe paid for yourself?
Yeah, the first one I think might have been, I saw Black Oak, Arkansas in the Shrine Mosque Auditorium, also in Springfield, Missouri.
Is that where you grew up?
I grew up in Southern Missouri.
Southern Missouri. That's pretty good. That's good. I love that's got to be our first Dolly Parton. That's got to be the first Dolly Parton. It's really good.
The only reason we would have gone to stuff like that, the only reason my father could have been torn away from the livestock and the farm equipment was
part two of the show here.
Was that, Porter Wagner and the Wagoneers were huge. They had a syndicated television show, and that, my family watched, every whatever night it was on. And Dolly Parton was kind of the sparkle of that
That's
kind
so
of the
great.
sparkle of that show. And otherwise, like I said, we'd have been looking at livestock.
Well, that is part 2. We'll talk about that when I get up to the Dixon Day. Kevin Sharp from the Dixon, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Loved it. Thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to my tour, and everybody else hopefully go out and see the Dixon soon. But that is all the time we have this week. The Sidebar airs on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30. If you missed any of the show today, you can get the full episode of the Daily Memphian, WYXR, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. We'll see you next week.